This video is going to give you a brief overview and introduction to Excel Solver. And we've already done some creation of input-output tables within Excel, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into different situations where perhaps we're given an input and we want to evaluate the output, or if we want to, or we're given an output and we want to solve for the input value. So notice that these terms, these mathematical terms, go with when, similarly to when we do these kind of problems by hand, solving versus evaluating. So if you recall, in the previous unit, if we were evaluating a function, we were finding the value of the output value or the y values. And so if we were given an input, in this case, if we gave an input 2 and we want to evaluate this function, we would just input 2 everywhere we had an x. So in this case, f of 2 is equal to 3 times 2 plus 1 equals 7. So we evaluated that function using the formula to get the output of 7. When we do that in Excel, rather than doing it by hand and putting it in a calculator, we're going to enter whatever that input we're given into, if it's not already into the input column, we're going to enter it, and if our formulas are set up here and referenced, Excel will evaluate it for us. If we are looking to solve for the input, rather than doing it by hand, we're going to have Excel do it for us. So if we are given an output and we want to solve for the input, recall that when we did it by hand, in this case, we're using function notation saying f of x equals 0. That means that we have an output of 0, meaning we were told that our y value is 0, and we want to solve for the input or the x value. So when we did it by hand, we substituted 0 in for y, and then we were going to solve for x algebraically. We subtracted 1 from both sides, and we got negative 1 equals 3x. To undo this, multiply by 3, we divide both sides by 3, and that reduces, and we got x equals negative 1/3. So that was solving by hand. When we're doing it in Excel, we're going to use Excel Solver to solve for the input value. So if we're given an output, we use Solver to solve for the input or the x value. So let's take an example here. You can refer back to this chart here, but I've got also an Excel file open. So if we have a function f of x equals x squared, I've got that over here. I'm just going to pull this over. Okay. So if we want to create an input-output table, we put our input on the left. You don't have to write input-output, but I just want you to recognize that that's really what we're doing. We're creating an input-output table in Excel. My input column comes first, so I'm inputting x because I have f of x, and then I output f of x equals x squared. So I've got my labels here, and this is telling me that I want to have my input go from -3 to +3, and I want to have increments of 0.4. So if I start at -3, I can tell Excel how to fill the values in if I give it the pattern. So if I want my increments to be 0.4, so -3 plus 0.4 is -2.6. So that's the pattern, 0.4. So I'm going to highlight both these things, okay? I have to highlight the first and the second value that shows that pattern or that increment of 0.4. And now I'm going to pull my cursor down because I'm going to fill the rest of these cells in. So I'm going to use this fill handle. I'm going to left click, and as I start to drag down, you see that number in the bottom right hand corner? That tells me if I stopped what that value would be in the cell. So I want to go all the way to 3. Right? Because that's what we were asked to do. So there. So now if I pick up the cursor, I have created an interval of -3 to +3. And then I'm just increasing by 0.4 each time. And so if I'm going to complete the output values, you can see here that I've already set this cell equal to, I want it to be x squared. So x values are in column A, so A3, and I use that caret key raised to the second. And so once I do that, I can just copy these down if I use my fill handle. Oops. And let's see here. There we go. There we go. And now I have filled in all those values. So let's take a look at what this graph looks like. So it says create a graph of this function. Notice that things start here. I've got 9, 6, 4, right? It's getting smaller, 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 smaller. Now it's getting bigger, 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 bigger. So let's see what this looks like. If I select this whole table, I'm going to insert, I'm going to use the scatter plot, drop down, and I want a smooth line graph. So I can see that the shape of this is a parabola, y equals x squared. Okay, so I created the graph. Now it says evaluate or solve. Well, I'm not solving. I know that my input is 1.5. The thing in the parentheses is my input. So I'm actually not solving here at all. I just want to find the value of my output, and then I want to highlight it in yellow. So I want my input to be 1.5. So here's my input column, and if I scan down here, 1.4. I don't have 1.5 here. So what I want to do is I want to find the input that's closest to 1.5, and that would be here at 1.4. And I can just type in 1.5 here and hit enter, and it automatically will calculate the output. So all I have to do if I'm given the input is I enter it into the cell closest to that value, and Excel will calculate or evaluate the function. Okay, so that's what it says if you refer back to the sheet here. I just want to enter. See, I don't have a 1.5. I'm going to enter it in the cell closest to 1.5, and it will evaluate it. And if I want to write that in function notation, I could then just say that f of 1.5 is equal to 2.25. So now if I want to solve, right, find or solve, in this case I say I have f of x equals 2. Well, it gave me the output. It says I need the output to equal 2, or the y value equal 2. So here's my output column. So I'm going to scan down to see, well, do I see a 2 here? Well, no, I don't. But what I see is here, 1.96 is pretty close to 2. Okay. And in fact, if you look at this, I'm going to, if here's an output of 2, I'm actually going to have two solutions, one over here and one over here. So when I look at my input-output table, I want to find the output that's closest to 2, and that's where I'm going to use solver. Instead of doing that by hand, using the quadratic formula or something else, I'm going to use solver. So I select the cell, so I click on it, so B7, that's the cell I'm in, and I want to use data solver, and it brings up these solver parameters. So I want to set these objectives here. And so my objective is, well, I'm interested in this cell here, B7. So I'm going to click on that. So this is telling me that cell B7, I want to set that equal to a value of 2. I want to force the y value or the output to be 2, right? That's what it says here. I want f of x to equal 2. And so what I want to do is I want to find or solve for the x value. And that's what this next box is asking me. I want to change variable cell, meaning I want to put that x value right next to it. So that's all that's asking me for. Where do you want to put the x value? And we typically want to put it right next to that output. And just be sure when you're looking at Excel, sometimes this box here is checked you want to uncheck that. If you have it checked, it will only give you positive values. And we're pretty sure we want to have a negative x value here, so it will give us an error, or it won't give us the correct answer unless we uncheck that. And then if I click solve, okay, yep, we want to keep that solver solution. And notice here that Excel has forced this cell B7 to be approximately equal to 2. Okay, so a lot of times it's going to not quite look exactly like 2, but we can format this. If I select those cells, I go to my home screen and I format this. If I use number, and let's say I just do 1 decimal place, like that. Now I have negative 1.4 and 2. Okay. Now, technically, I have another spot here where it's going to equal 2. So when I continue down here, this is pretty close to 2 here, right? 2.25 is closer to 2 than 1 is. I could use solver again to find the other part of this curve that's equal to 2. When you use solver more than once, make sure that you always check what's in this objective, because it will default to the last value. So I'm going to clear that out, and now I'm going to force this to equal 2. Okay, a value of 2, and where do I want to put that x value? It's going to default to where I put it before. I need to clear it out and select that, and good. And so now I have both of my points on that curve that are equal to, where my output is equal to 2. Okay.